Hey guys, welcome back. It's Biggs. Now, if you watched part one of this series to the end, today's going to be part two. We're going to finish it up and where we're going to continue that discussion about how we're taking care of our isopods and can we do it a little bit better. Now, bear in mind, this video I'm filming is actually, it was all done part and parcel within the 2 days of each other. So the other one hasn't even probably been released by the time I'm putting this one together. So I haven't seen all the comments yet, or the thumbs up or the thumbs down. Hopefully not. Hopefully one way or another. All the whole purpose is that we just want to get that conversation started. So let's get into part two. Now, if you're as fascinated as I am by the incredible diversity of life that surrounds us, then you truly belong here with me. I make videos on all facets of nature, from aquariums and vivariums, DIY projects, reptiles, isopods, insects and arachnids, all sorts of unique and bizarre plants. And I try to do something a little different. I want to really dig down deeper and into the science behind it all. So if you haven't already, please consider hitting that subscribe button, as well as ringing that notification bell, and you'll always be kept up to date when I upload new content. I've seen Wally over at Supreme Gecko did an exceptional video about using different container sizes for different results. It was very, very well done, and to me, I think that is an absolute integral part as well. It's like, we are all, everybody that keeps isopods, and I apologize, I can't say that everybody, I honestly don't know everybody that keeps isopods, but I'll say in general, from what we see, most people that keep isopods have one container of this species, one container of that species, and and they acquire more and more and more. And you can keep what you like because that's what you like. Now for me, I'm starting to question, there's certain species that I really enjoy culturing, and it could be for a myriad of reasons. Either I like I like their pattern, I like their color. My daughter Paisley really likes them. The way they replicate is either it's perfect for me, or it's too fast, or it's too little, or they even just make me pose questions in regards to their care and culture. I am very much an advocate of if we're not learning, we're dying. So to me, I always like being challenged. I always like questioning things. It's the way I've been my entire life, But to say that this species is thriving is a bit of an understatement. They go through leaf litter very, very quickly. Now, theoretically, this one's thriving. Like you look at the volumes that I'm producing of this Armadillidium klugii, I believe this is the Montenegro variant, and you compare this to, say, some of the other species that I may have that may not thrive at the same level, or at a much slower rate, such as like some of the Cubaris species mentioned earlier. These ones happen to be Armadillidium officinalis, and this is the Greek variant, and they were a little bit slower to establish. Like a lot of the European ones, they like it a lot drier. But once they got started, I don't even know if you can see it, but this culture is just plugged full of them. They are absolutely everywhere. They're a fascinating species in that they actually have an audible sound, an audible kind of squeak, and a little bit different. They can really, really tightly roll up into a ball. But as mentioned, these animals are detrivores. Their job is to break stuff down. Think of them like a mushroom. It's the best way I could relate it to it. But that's what their job is. They break product down into a smaller section, and then another animal or another critter will come along and break it down even further. Do we set up our isopods for maximum potential? There's another question for us. If I wanted to theoretically really produce Cubaris, would I have one container of this species, this one being Cubaris red skirts, or would I have multiple containers of them? And play around with humidity, play around with food sources, play around with calcium, play around with temperature levels, things like that. And then really, really see which gives me the absolute maximum yield. Because if all of us all start tinkering around and getting this and start playing around with these things and getting them to a little bit higher level, they can become much more readily available. And these things could theoretically come as popular as keeping tropical fish. Now this is a species, this is Priscilla ornatus, and this culture here is, I often notice that there's a bit of die-off in this culture. And that one there is, because this one here is likes it even drier in my experiences than say Hoffman, Sagai, or almost any of them. This is probably the one that, in my opinion, out of the ones that I keep, that requires it the driest out of all of them. And it seems that the adults, maybe the adults, and like Russ Wilson over at Aquarimax just did a video the other day where he talked about the longevity of some of these species and finding dead ones within their cultures. And sometimes it is just the natural course. These are not long-lived animals. And they break down their products, and when one just seems to pass away in the culture, the rest of them will consume it. It's another source, another food source for them, because that is honestly their role. We keep them because they're unique, they're fascinating, they're very different, low-maintenance pet. But if we could spend some more time just really, really observing them and watching their behaviors, I think we still got a lot more to learn from them. I think they're very, very fascinating. And I hope you do too. Now, as I mentioned earlier, understanding and using the proper container size, I think is tantamount to your success. Now, in the new room, once the new room is ready, I currently have about 24 species, or 24 variants of isopods, we'll say. But in the new room, just under one of the main stands, I have made space for 32 bins, roughly this size. This is a standard, I think it's a 16 quart. This one has slightly different ventilation. This particular species I found is not, it doesn't require the same level of ventilation as, say, some of the bigger Procilios. This is Armadillidium fronta triangulum. This is Corfu. It's another Greek species. It's a very unique species. It's fascinating. This one here, my numbers on my initial culture when they came dwindled down to I only found about 3 to 4 individuals. And I just left it alone, kept maintaining the aspects of the culture of feeding it and cleaning it and caring for it. And out of the blue, one day on my normal Saturday maintenance with Paisley, I came down and this culture had kind of taken off all of a sudden. But in regards to choosing and how to choose proper sizes, I relate it again to a balance system or a nature system. The larger the size environment you can provide, the more readily and easier it is to maintain stability. So if you have species such as a lot of the Kubaris, and rubber ducky is a perfect example, that like to burrow all the time, well then perhaps instead of this little 4-inch display quart or whatever you want to call it, it's only about 4 to 5 inches in depth, maybe I should use one that's much, much deeper. Now here's my container, my culture that I use for my rubber duckies. Now these are the new bins that I'll be using in the new setup. I like them because I've shown them with you guys before. They have the locking handles. I can use the vents. I think I'm going to have to make one little adjustment and put in some nice mesh screen, a little circle of it, and hot glue it or silicone it inside here to prevent the mankai or babies from escaping. But I think this culture would do a lot better if it was 3 times the depth. And I can get this exact culture, the exact size container at my local Walmart that is actually 3 times the depth. And it fits, otherwise it's the exact same dimensions. But you'll notice that they are always in the same spots. And they always like it a lot more moist. There's an adult right there. And they're always, you'll notice that adult is on this side and it was down here on top of the moss. So I bet you if we were to be cautious and kind of take it apart a little bit and go into where the moss, this moss is, the sphagnum moss here, and go down a little bit, we'd probably find all sorts of babies in there in amongst the moss. And that's just that species tends to like it a little bit warmer and a little bit moist. But if we think of their environment where they live, we need to make sure that this environment, and this is me just speculating, but if they live in a limestone style cave, the water source that they're going to have is going to be extremely alkaline. The moisture is going to be, everything is going to be extremely alkaline. There's probably not going to be any plant life whatsoever within these caves. If anything, there'll be maybe some sort of form of type of moss that may grow. And that may be about it. Low level, low light level, that sort of stuff. But what I'm getting at is that these guys here, if they come from those type of environments, then I think we have to be extremely careful in diligent and making sure that their environments that we keep them in do not become too acidic. If the pH were to drop too much in these environments, I think we could very well have a crash. Now, maybe I'm incorrect. Maybe these guys, they do come from a limestone cave, and as gross as it may sound, maybe they spend the bulk of their life in amongst all the guano that would be on the floor of the cave, which would be very moist. It might be more acidic, or I'm sorry, more acidic than alkaline. You know, it's up for questions. I don't really know. It's part of the fun. We got to experiment. We got to play around. But bottom line is, these are animals that break things down. We need to stop taking it so incredibly serious. Have some fun with it, and definitely experiment a little bit with it. And one last point before we go away today, and it'll probably end up being the topic of a separate video. I know my good friend Wally over at Supreme Gecko has done an excellent video on it already. But it's the fanatical use of different substrates. Again, these animals are detrivores. They break things down. As long as we're meeting the needs of them, be it pH-wise, alkalinity or acidity, and they've got the organic matter that they need, I think they will thrive. I've dialed in my substrates by playing around with different things to make sure that I meet the needs of the animals. And that is the only thing, honestly, that is important. When it came to like the Cubaris species that I believe to come from, say, limestone environments, I add a lot more calcium carbonate, eggshells, cuttle bones. I make sure that there's enough. I like the calcium carbonate because I buy it as a reptile substrate. It's a calcium source for using things like if you had a leopard gecko or a bearded dragon. It comes in all sorts of colors. I just buy it as white. And I sprinkle it very, very liberally amongst the media or the substrates that I mix in here. So you'll often see in a lot of them, depending on what type of species they are, if I think they're more calcium demanding, is there'll be a lot more white sprinkling throughout the substrate when I mix it up than there would be. And it's something that is readily available to the animal. It's readily absorbable. They can consume it as they need it. But the more importantly for me is that it maintains the consistency of the pH, or the alkalinity or acidity of the substrate, because with all the animals in here, you know, you start off with a culture of 10, all these animals in here, and once the culture starts expanding, people often talk about having a crash. Well, you've gone from 10 animals to 100 animals to 4,000 animals very, very quickly in very short order. Every one of those animals is producing waste products. And waste products are in the form of a solid waste products, or poop, which is known as frass, but also with the ventilation being extremely critical depending on which species. If you don't have enough ventilation, the amount of gas that these animals can produce, maybe on our scale might be minor, but to these animals living in these small enclosed little shoeboxes, maybe we're killing off animals just by surely not having enough ventilation. Another food for thought. And as I like to tell people that maintain aquariums, that ask me questions when I travel and speak at events all over the place, is that you got to understand it. Like an aquarium, the isopods are in a container. So think of the container as the aquarium. We do water changes on an aquarium to maintain the balance of that system. Well, in an environment such as this, with isopods, they're a detrivore, as mentioned, obviously several times today, but as they break down these products, there's waste products. So these cultures need to be refreshened. And that does not mean just the addition of more and more food. That would be the equivalent in an aquarium of just adding water that evaporated. All those toxins are going to build up, and eventually it will cause a crash. So we periodically got to really constantly monitor these environments. So I look at this culture. This is my Bacillio magnificus, and these are kind of a seasonal spawner. Now, for some people, this would be considered a more challenging species or a more advanced species. For me, it works really, really well in the fact that I know they're only going to reproduce maybe twice a year. So what that means on what we're talking about is that this system will maintain stability a lot longer than, say, that species of granulatum or some of those Montenegro types or Klugii types that will overtake the population, will explode, and they'll just overtake the environment so quickly. Those are the ones that we've got to keep a closer eye on, making sure that we are on top of it, that the balance of the system is there, the pH of the system, the substrate maintains its alkalinity or pH, and automatically we just want to keep going, keep having some fun. So with that, my friends, I hope you enjoyed today's video. I always love talking about isopods with each and every one of you. Maybe we should be doing a live feed on them specifically, bringing some more guests. But if anything, my goal of today
was mainly to just get you to question. I said the topic was, are we doing it wrong? I don't believe we're doing it wrong. I just wonder if we could do it better. Because bottom line is, I cannot tell you what humidity it's going to be in your place. I can't tell you the size of vents to put on your unit. I cannot tell you a lot of these things. These are all things that you are going to have to figure out, because every single person's home, the environment where they're going to place their culture is going to be a little bit different than mine. A little bit different than a lot of the other guys. So there's a lot of real solid YouTubers out there. But bottom line is, we've got to play around. We've got to do the experiments. And bottom line, we got to have some fun. So with that, my friends, I wish you the best. Take care. We'll see you soon.